Hi, my name is Patricia Stepler, and this is Your Inner Power. And today I thought I would just share with you some information about why I named my show Your Inner Power and what that has to do with you. So you have an idea of what to expect when you come to my show. So for basically my entire adult life, I have done personal development. And yet I never felt like I was making the progress. And, I know a lot of people like that. I would go to conferences and conventions. I'd read multiple books and take programs and so on. And yet I never had the results that I thought I should for the amount of time and effort I was putting towards it. Now, did it make me a better person? Absolutely. And if the only reason you do personal development is because you want to be a better person, then that's a great reason in itself. But I was trying to figure out why I didn't have those results. And, then life kind of gets in the way. And I was very, very busy. And my son was involved in a lot of sports. And so about that time, I stopped going to a lot of those conventions and conferences and stopped reading the books. And basically I started to think, this really doesn't work. I thought it did, but it really doesn't work. And my son, like I said, he was involved in sports and he really wanted to get a college scholarship. In fact, when he was 12, he told me that I didn't need to worry about putting him through college because my oldest daughter was in college. My second daughter was about to go to college. And he said, you don't need to worry about me because I'm going to get a scholarship. And I thought it was just a very sweet gesture for a 10-year-old to consider, or 12-year-old, sorry, to consider. And, he would tell me that all the time. He would, over and over, he would say, Mom, you don't need to worry. I'm going to get a college scholarship. Mom, you don't need to worry. And I didn't believe him. Now, I probably should have had a little more belief in him because he was always a very determined child and he would set goals for himself. Even when he was about 3 or 4 years old, some of the neighbor kids who were, probably a good 4 or 5 years older than he were making fun of him because he still had training wheels on his bike. And he got so upset about this. He came home and he demanded that my husband take off his training wheels. And, he was going to learn to ride a bike without them. And of course, as a mom, I was very concerned that we did this because I was afraid he would get hurt. And yet he had those training wheels off. And within an hour, he learned how to ride a bike. And that was the end of that. And he was also determined because when he was born, he had a collapsed lung. And, within hours of his birth, he was being airlifted to a larger hospital. And he went through that and came through that beautifully. And when he was 5 years old, he was diagnosed with 2 lazy eyes. Both of his eyes were lazy because you only have 2. And he had to have eye therapy for 3 different years when he was in kindergarten and 2nd grade and 5th grade. And without that, he wouldn't have been able to hit a baseball with a bat. He wouldn't have been able to have the perception to catch a football. And so those were skills that he really needed to become an athlete. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, when he was, probably about 1 year old, he started running and we noticed his legs were bowing. You see, he really started to walk when he was about 8 months old to keep up with his sisters. And his legs weren't ready to support his weight and they started to bow. And so then we had to put this brace on him at night, which he hated. And he would fight and, cry when we'd put it on. And most mornings he had kicked it off. So how his legs got straight, I don't know, but it was a good thing they did because when he was 12, he got to go to Cooperstown and play at a place called Dreams Park. Look it up if you've never heard of it. It's a multiple baseball fields for little league kids to come to. And They have 96 teams there every single week. And the week he was there, he was in this roadrunner race, which was testing the speed that each player had at running the bases. And out of those 96 teams, each one sent their fastest player to this roadrunner race. He was picked for his team, and he actually came in third place out of those other 96 kids. So he couldn't have done that had his legs not been straightened. Well, when he told me this, he's 12, that he was going to get this college scholarship, and I did not believe him. I never told him that. I let him believe that he was going to get it. What I didn't realize is that he was so focused on that. I said, he told me that over and over and over again. And what I didn't realize is as many times as he was telling me that, he was telling himself that probably tenfold, maybe even 20-fold. Well, he finally decided that the sport he wanted to play, because that was how he's going to get the scholarship, as a collegiate athlete. And at the time, he played 3 sports: football, baseball, and basketball. And I asked him, now mind you, he's a 12-year-old child. And I said, so what sport are you going to get this, scholarship in? He says, I don't know. Well, by the time he was in 9th grade, he had a pretty severe injury to his shoulder. He popped his shoulder out playing football. And so even though he had been told he would play Friday nights under the lights as a sophomore because of his skills, he chose not to play football because of that injury. Because when he was injured like that, he couldn't even throw a baseball. So anyway, he gave up the football. So that wasn't a consideration. So now we were down to basketball and baseball. And he finally decided on baseball of all things. Now, I say that of all things because if you know anything about college scholarships, baseball is the least likely thing that you will ever get a full scholarship in. And if you're ever offered a full scholarship in baseball, chances are you are so good that you probably turn that down and go pro. So, and chances are you're probably either very good hitter or you are a very good pitcher. And which my son was not a pitcher, and he played outfield, which is also an unlikely position that you're ever going to get a very good college scholarship in. But you see, he didn't get a college scholarship in baseball. He got one for his academics. So the school that he finally decided was going to play baseball at, when we went down to visit the school, they said, now, because of your academics, you can expect a third to a half at the most, because of course we were also out of state. So there's no state funds coming in there either. But you see, he didn't want a third or a half. He wanted a full scholarship. That's what he had hoped for. Now, when I tell this story, sometimes it sounds like everything just fell right into place for him and he just went from one thing to another, which he did tend to do. But along the way, he had a lot of disappointments, and a lot of times he could have quit. There were times when coaches didn't appreciate his talent, and so they wouldn't play him, and he became very discouraged that he wasn't very good. He had times when he, of course, had injuries and didn't think he was going to be able to continue. But what really hurt him the most was the team that he believed, the summer travel team, because if you know anything about baseball, you do summer travel teams. And the summer travel team he thought that he needed to be on in order to get this full scholarship. He played for him 1 year in the fall, and they told him, if you do a really good job in the fall, you'll be on our summer team. Well, he did a really good job in the fall. He was one of the top players at his age group in the fall. And when it came time for the spring team, he was not selected. Now, at the time, that was devastating to him. And he thought all this work, all these 5 years that he had been working towards a scholarship was over. But you see, what he didn't realize was there's a universe that knew what he wanted. And that universe also knew that the path he thought he was on wasn't the path he needed. And so he didn't make that team. We scrambled because most of the teams had already been selected by this point. So we scrambled, got him on another team. Here's the amazing thing. So this other team had one opening left for a player. And that opening was for an outfielder, which was exactly the position my son played. I don't believe that was a coincidence. That position had been left open for him. So he tried out for that team, he made that team, and the school that he ended up going to would never have seen him had he been on that other team. And chances are, like, I don't know anybody in that other team that ever got a full scholarship. So he had to be on a different team. So when his scholarship letter came, we were getting ready to go get something to eat. We stopped, we picked up the mail. It's just my son and I in the car, and he's holding this envelope in his hand. And he said, "Mom, wouldn't it be funny if this was a full scholarship?" And of course, because I did not believe he could get a full scholarship, because after all, we'd been told a half to a third would be the most. And I reminded him of that because, you see, I didn't want him to feel disappointed when he opened that envelope and it was not a full scholarship. I wanted to protect him. But when he opened that envelope and we saw the amount and we saw what it said, it was indeed a full scholarship. Now, years later, he told me, he said, "You know what, Mom? There was never any doubt in my mind that that was a full scholarship." Well, when that happened, that made me say, I knew he had caused that to happen. But in all the years, 25 years, 30 years of personal development, I didn't know how he did it. And that sent me on a journey to figure it out, because I knew he had done it. I didn't know how he did it. And that's when I discovered that we have these inner powers. And when we do 3 things and follow 3 simple steps, we can create the life we choose. The problem is that most people, they don't use their inner powers. They allow the outside world to dictate to them, and they live through their senses. You see, we interact with the world through our 5 senses. And most of us know what the 5 senses are, but how many people know what the 6 intellectual faculties are? You see, our 6 intellectual faculties are the things that separate us from all the other animals in the animal kingdom. You probably see the picture of the elephants in my background. The elephants interact with the world through their senses, but they don't have these intellectual faculties. They don't use their imagination to build the picture of the dream that they want, that picture of getting that full scholarship. They don't have the intuition to know that sometimes when you have a disappointment, it means you just need to shift. They don't know that they have to rely on their memory to remember, an experience which was either good or bad, and how you might need to shift to have a different result. They don't know things like perception. Perception's reality for a lot of people. And how do you perceive the world around you? How do you perceive other people? How are you making sure that your perception of somebody and something is going to be the right one for you? They don't understand. The elephants don't understand reasoning. They don't reason with each other. And see, that's something I had to do with my son. I had to get him to understand that, yes, that team turned him down, but no, this other team might be the answer he needed. He had to reason. And then will. You see, if my son had not been able to hold that vision of a full scholarship in his mind and hold it with his will, it wouldn't have happened. So it was the the power that he used, those inside powers. And he was actually what we call an unconscious competent. He didn't know what he was doing. And therefore, you see, when things happen great for people, and you may have seen this in your own life, you know, you have something and it just turned out so perfect, exactly the way you wanted it. I've had many instances in my own life now that I understand, looking back. There was a time I won a diamond ring. I got a new job. You know, I got a new house, and they were all because of following the same pattern of thought and using my imagination and the will and all these intellectual faculties and my inside powers. But at the time, for many of those examples I just shared with you, at the time I was an unconscious competent. Yes, that particular time it worked out, but the next time it didn't. And that was the frustrating thing of doing personal development all those years. Yes, every once in a while, something would turn out just exactly perfect, you know, in my mind. But because I didn't understand that I'd stumbled upon something, just like my son had stumbled upon something, I couldn't repeat it. And so it was that lack of repetition, which actually started to cause the problems. So when you understand what you're doing, then you can repeat it and you can teach it to somebody else. So as I went on my journey and I started to explore what he had done to accomplish his dream and his goal, and I started to figure out how I could help others, that led me to understand how to use these inside powers. And once you learn to use these inside powers, you can start to accomplish one thing after another, because you use the same exact process. Now, here's the kicker. None of this is difficult. How would a 12-year-old who had had a collapsed lung at birth, had 2 lazy eyes when he was 5, he had bowed legs, and I forgot to tell you, when he turned 8, his largest challenge came with being diabetic. And so he was an insulin dependent diabetic trying to be an athlete, which is also not an easy thing, especially when you're going through puberty. It's very difficult. So he had all these things working against him, plus all the regular things everybody has as far as this disappointment and discouragement and, you know, things not going as you planned. So how can that happen? You know, because you're using your inside powers. You're using powers that connect with the whole universe. And sometimes that seems a little woo-woo to people. And I get it, because it did to me at first too. Like, I knew he had caused this to happen. And then as I started my journey and found out how woo-woo it was, I wasn't sure how I was going to relate to that, because I'm think of myself as a very rational thinker. And so, you have to start to understand that even though we feel we're in charge, there's something more out there. And there's things out there we don't understand. And when we follow the laws of the universe, because the laws of the universe don't change, they work the same for you, and they work the same for me, and they work the same for everybody. And so we have to realize that there's a higher power, whatever you want to call it, infinite intelligence. That's what Napoleon Hill used to say. He called it infinite intelligence. And I want to just read to you this quote by Steve Bow. And I love this quote. He said, "God's gift to you is more talent and ability than you will ever hope to use. And in your lifetime. And your gift to God is to develop as much of that talent and ability that you can for your life." So how can we start to use those inside powers and develop that talent and ability? You see, my son had natural gifts, and he also developed some of his talents and abilities. And he continues to develop different talents and abilities, which is fun to watch him, because there's a time not too long ago that I said, "Where's my son and what have you done to him?" Because I was starting to see these other talents and interests that he had that were nothing like he ever had during high school. And you see, he's learning, I've had to go back and tell him how he accomplished what he accomplished, because he had no clue. And lots of times when we're together, he'll say something to me and I'll say, remember when you did such and such? Well, let me explain how that happened. And he's so fascinated by it. But you see, he had to do a lot of things differently. And I said there were 3 steps. Let me share with you the 3 steps. And I'm sure you've heard these before, but it's the way that I teach them that gets you to understand the benefits of where you're going to go. And that's why this your inside power show is going to be teaching you. The first step is to think bigger. He had a pretty big dream. How many kids do you know that tell their parents, I'm going to get a college scholarship. You don't have to worry about putting me through school. That was a really big dream. And the bigger dream was it was going to be an athletic scholarship. Now, it was academic. That's okay. He still got to go to school and play baseball. So he thought bigger. He didn't have limiting beliefs, and he continued to believe that he was going to get that scholarship even when things didn't go well for him. So he constantly kept reinforcing that thought, that bigger thought pattern. The next thing you have to do is you have to become bigger. You have to be somebody you're not. You have to see yourself as already achieving the goal. That's why it was so easy for him when he opened that letter to believe that it was a full scholarship, because he had seen that so many times. That's the only letter he ever opened in his imagination, was a letter for a full scholarship. But he became the person he needed to be in order to get that scholarship. He had the academic standard he needed. He had the personality he needed. He had the leadership skills he needed. He had developed that inside himself, and he never allowed himself to falter in any way towards that. So he became the person. And the other thing is you have to be willing to play on a bigger stage. So you have to play bigger. You see, you had to be willing to take risk. He put himself out there. He took risk. He wasn't afraid to move towards his goal, because you see, as you move towards your dream or your goal, that goal actually starts to move towards you. So he did that too, put himself out there. So 3 things you need to do. You need to start thinking bigger. You need to be, creating that goal that inspires you. If it's not inspirational, you won't do it. And then once you set that goal, you have to decide, what kind of person do I need to be to get there? Because the person you are today has gotten you to the place where you are today. But to go further, you've got to change something. You can't expect to accomplish a huge dream and not change yourself. And that's where you have to start working and building those inside powers. And now that you know this, see, you have an advantage over my son, because he kind of did this all by accident, let's say. He was an unconscious competent. He did not understand what he was doing. But the beauty is that there's information out here, and I can share with you how to do this. So you have to think bigger. You have to become somebody different, and you have to be willing to take a risk. And you have to be willing to allow things not to work out for you. Because I believe that sometimes when we have a disappointment or something's not going the way we planned, it's a test. And I always look at those things as tests. You see, when my son didn't get on that team that he wanted, that was a test. Are you going to quit? Or do you really want this? And when he was 12 and he had a coach that basically told him, yeah, you're only good enough to play half a game. We don't need you to play. We don't need you to be the full-time player in the team. That was a test. Are you going to give up or not? And because he didn't give up, he got to go to Cooperstown and be in a really awesome team, a really high-level players because he chose to be the best he could with the half of the game that he played. And, to show others that he was a good player beyond the local team he played. So you have to take those risks. You have to deal with those discouragements. And when you do, then you can start to achieve at a much higher level. So those three things I'm going to cover in depth when I do a 3-day event in March 10th through 12th. And you can find this on the store, the Win-Win Women's store. And you can register there. It's a very small fee. It's just $97 to come to this event. And I'm going to give you a free upgrade to the VIP. So you can actually bring a friend with you if you'd like. And, for the same amount, maybe you want to split the fee with somebody. And you can come to that event and learn how to really figure out how to think bigger, how to be bigger, and how to play bigger, plus a whole lot more. Because once you have that down, we also need to take action. And we do have to put a plan together. My son had a plan that he put together. I put plans together. I help my clients to put plans together of how they think they need things to go. Realizing that we don't always have the right plan, but we have to have some plan because we have to start to take action. And if we don't take action, nothing's going to happen. That whole action reaction you learned when you were in science class, we have to take action. As we take action, then the world will react to us differently. But if we just do nothing, the world will do nothing. So we have to make sure we take action. So the first action I want you to take is to go to the Win-Win Women's store and to get that ticket for my March event so that you can be part of that action-oriented team and learn the steps that you need to turn your dreams into realities and to create the life that you really want so that you can turn everything in your life into what you picture it to be and live your life to the fullest. So I want to just finish here reading this quote from Steve Bowe one more time. God's gift to you is more talent and ability than you will ever use in your lifetime. And your gift to God is to develop those talents and abilities so that you can live your life. So what kind of gift are you making for us to see? And hopefully you can come and share with us. This is Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power, where I want you to be the magic in your dreams.